Okay, so now consider that there's a line with this equation given to you, and so this is called line L, and then there's a second line L1 which is parallel to L. Okay, so we know two things about this new line L1. It is parallel to L and it passes through this point. Okay, now remember this. To find the equation of a line, you need two things. You need one, its slope, and two, any point on the line. These are the only two things you will ever need to find the slope of a line. Sorry, to find the equation of a line. Okay. Now, how do you do it in this specific case? As you can see, over here, you're given a point on the line. So we are fulfilling this requirement, we're done. However, we don't know the slope, do we? Thing is, they will always give you the slope either directly. So they will either tell you that the slope is, whatever, like 2, or they will give it to you in code. So normally, I mean, of course, this is an exam. They want to give it to you in a bit of a twisted way. So in this case, what they've given is they've given you a line, and then they said that your line is parallel to that line. Okay, so they've technically given you the slope of your line by giving you the slope of another line, because being parallel means equal slope. So if two lines are parallel, they will have the same slope, both of them. Okay, so the question really becomes, what is the slope of L1? It is the same as the slope of this other line that's been given to us because they are parallel. So the question now is, how do you find the slope of this line? It's easy. First, make y the subject in this equation, okay, to put it in this general form. And then just subtract 2x from both sides. So, and the equation of the line that's been given to us, L, becomes this. So from this equation, I can directly tell that the slope of my line L is -2. That is the slope of my line. Okay. And why? So this is the slope of the line that's given to us, and therefore it is also the slope of the line that we are trying to find the slope of, because they are again parallel. So they have equal slopes. That's how we can find the gradient of our line. Now, what about the second part? For the second part, we have to look at, so what does it say? It says find the equation of the line. Okay. Now, this is an extremely common question. I'm sure you guys have seen this before and maybe even struggled with it, but it's very easy. As I said, for the equation of a line, you need the slope and any point on the line. Okay, how do we do it then? We know the slope of our line, it's -2, and we know a point on the line, which is given 6, -4. Okay, so how do we do this now? Well, because we know the slope, we can write down the general equation and plug in the slope that we know. So the equation looks like this, right? Okay. So this is your equation. You don't know b yet. Okay, so what do we do? We know this point. We know that when x is 6, y is -4. So we plug in this point into our equation and we get, so if we plug in y for -4, see, y for -4, and we plug in 6 for x, we get this. And when we have -4 equals -12 plus b. And now I can add 12 to both sides to find what b is. B is equal to 8. So now that we found b, by plugging in the point, we already know m. We can now finally say the equation of our line is y equals -2x plus b, which is 8. This is the equation of your line. This method is always going to be the same, okay? It's always this way. So whenever you're asked to find the equation of a line and they tell you the slope and a point, always use this method. Plug in the point, plug in the known slope. See, the known slope is here and the point is here, sorry, here. And then just solve it. This is how you can find the equation of a line. Okay, next question is also very, very common. Find the x coordinate of the point where your line crosses the x-axis. This is just a very long way to say find the x-intercept. Okay, so it literally just means find the x-intercept. How do you find the x-intercept? The thing is, when you have the equation of a line, finding any point is extremely easy. How? Look, when you know the equation of a line, you can find any point, like if you know one thing about the point already. So for example, if you know the x value is 2, you can find the y value very easily by just plugging in the x value in the equation and solving for y. Similarly, if you know the y value is 3 and you want to find the x value, just plug in the y value in place of y and then solve for x. So you can find any point if you know one thing about the point when you know the equation. So here they're saying, can you find the x coordinate of the point? Okay, so you're supposed to find x when the line crosses the x-axis. Okay. Now think about the point where the line crosses the x-axis. Okay. Any point on the x-axis actually has the same y value. What do you guys think that y value is? What's the y value on any point on the x-axis?
0.
Right, exactly. Because you are standing at the exact middle of the y-axis. Right, so 0. Now, at the x-axis, all the y values are 0. So remember that for the x-intercept, always plug in y equals 0 into your equation. So x-intercept basically. And vice versa for the y-intercept. If you want to find the y-intercept, plug in x equals 0. So since we are looking for the x-intercept, how do I know that, by the way? Because again, they said find the x-coordinate of the point where it crosses the x-axis. Crossing the x-axis means x-intercept. So we plug in 0 for y, and we get this new equation. And now we just need to solve for x. To solve this for x, I will subtract 8 on both sides, and then I'll divide by -2 on both sides, which leaves me with -8 over -2, which is 4, because the negatives cancel out, and 8 over 2 is 4. So the x value is 4, which means that the point where the line crosses the x-axis is x value is 4, y value is of course 0. Why? Because it's on the x-axis. Okay, so on the x-axis. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay, perfect. By the way, don't hesitate to ask any questions because to me, everybody's equally bad at math or equally good at math if you want to think about it optimistically. Okay. Draw the two lines on the diagram below. So how do we draw two lines? Let's make the diagram that they've given us. So they will always give you the diagram. Let's maybe put it up here. So remember that, I mean, you guys probably already know this, but to draw a line, you always need 2 points, and that's it. Because if I give you 2 points, you can draw a line between them, right? You don't need any more points than that. Of course, you can use as many as you want, but you only really need 2. Okay. So first of all, we know that the line L1, because we've been talking about line L1 this whole time, crosses through this point, 4, 0. So let's put that on the plot. 4, 0 would be right there, because again, x is 4, y is 0. So y is 0 everywhere here, and 4 is, well, 4 here. So these are the 2 points that L1 passes through. Okay. So we can make a line that goes through. Actually, let's make it like this. So there. And that's L1. What about L2? Sorry, what about L though? Just L. Well, line L has this equation from earlier. See, it was given. Y equals -2x plus 3. The thing is, to draw this line, we need 2 points. So we don't know any points right now. Okay. So how do we find the 2 points that we need? First point is easy. Just look at this value because that is the y-intercept. We already know directly from the equation that this is where the line passes through the y-axis. But we also need one more point. Now the cool thing is you can use any point you want, meaning you can plug in, for example, x equals 1 and find the y value. You can plug in x equals 2 and find the y value. You can plug in, I don't know, 4 for y and get the x value, whatever. However, I find it easier to just plug in y equals 0 and find the x value from there, which means I'm trying to find the x-intercept because if y is 0, then I'm always on the x-intercept. So I'm going to plug in 0 into the y value and solve this equation for x. So I'll subtract 3 on both sides. and then I'll divide both sides by -2, which gives me x equals, so the negatives cancel out. Remember, whenever you divide two negative numbers, cancel out the minuses. And then you just have 3/2, which is half of 3, which is just 1.5 if you want to be a bit more, if you like decimals. So where is 1.5? This is 1. So 1.5 would be somewhere here, which means that the other line looks like, draw it, looks like this. Oops. Of course, it goes on forever. Like that, and like that. Okay. As you can see, they even appear parallel. So my drawing skills are not too bad after all. So this other line is L. Okay. And that is the end of this question. So does anybody have any questions about this?
No.
No. Perfect. I wanted to show you guys one more thing because it's also a very important common thing that pops up about lines before we move on to quadratics afterwards. So this is another very common question. See, last time they told you that the two lines are parallel, which is easy to understand. It just means that they have the same slope. However, in this question, there is a slight change. This time we have a perpendicular bisector. What is a bisector? Okay, so L, the line we are interested in, is the perpendicular bisector of line segment AB. First of all, what is line segment AB? It is basically this line. Okay, now perpendicular bisector. What does bisector mean? Bisector means something that cuts something in half. Okay, so it cuts you into two sections. And perpendicular means that it is 90 degrees to you, which means that the perpendicular bisector of this line would be a line that goes exactly through the half and it's perpendicular to the line. So this is what we call the perpendicular because it is, well, perpendicular, 90 degrees, bisector. Because again, it cuts you exactly in half. It goes through the center of AB, okay? So now, by telling us that L is a perpendicular bisector of AB, they've given us two things. See, they're asking you for the equation of L, right? The equation of this red line that I've drawn. If you go back, I told you a golden rule. I said that to find the equation of any line, you need its slope and any point on the line, okay? But here, they haven't given us anything. You don't know what the slope of this line is, and you don't know what it passes. I mean, any of these points, you don't know what this passes through. Of course, you can roughly say that it's 3, 4, but you cannot prove that. You have to prove it. So what do we do then? Well, the thing is, by telling you that line L is a perpendicular bisector of AB, they've actually given you the slope and a point. How? See, because L is perpendicular to AB, that means that there is a very important rule. The rule is, if two lines are perpendicular to each other, then the product of their slopes, meaning if you multiply their slopes, you will always get -1. This is a very important rule for any perpendicular lines in the world. Okay, so if we can find the slope of AB, we can find the slope of L because they have a relationship. They are directly connected to each other. Okay, so let's focus our attention on finding the slope of AB first. It's easy because they've given you 2 points on AB. So you just need to do change in y over change in x. See, the y value here is 3, the y value here is 1. So 3 minus 1 divided by the x value here is 6, the x value here is 2. So 6 minus 2. Change in y over change in x, which is 2 over 4, which is exactly equal to 1 over 2 because you can cancel out both of these for 1 over 2. So we found the slope of AB, but that's not what we're trying to find. We are trying to find the slope of L. The good thing is we know this relationship. Because they are perpendicular to each other, L and AB, the product of their slopes must be -1, which means that if I multiply 1 over 2 with the mystery slope of my line L, I should get -1. Which means that if I multiply both sides by 2, I can find what ML is. It will be, so over here the 2's cancel out, and over there I get -2. So the slope of my line L is -2. That is how you can find the slope of a line if you are given another line that is perpendicular to your line. Okay? So any questions about this? Is this clear?
Yeah.
If somebody didn't understand it at all, by the way, let me know, because I can just explain this a little bit differently. All good?
I'm a bit lost.
hmm So the thing is, if you know the slope of a line, what I'm saying is that you will also know the slope of the line that is 90 degrees to that line. That's the case basically. Okay.
Mm.
For example, if I tell you that the slope of this line is 2, then you can directly say that the slope of this line is minus 1 over 2. If I tell you that the slope of this line is, let's say, 5, the slope of the line perpendicular to it will always be minus 1 over 5. If I tell you that the slope of a line is 4, the perpendicular line slope will be, what do you think?
-1/4.
That's it. That's literally all I've explained here. So,
Okay.
so if you know that L is perpendicular to AB, then if you know the slope of AB is 1 over 2, just flip it and make it negative, and that'll tell you the slope of your line. See, I flipped it, made it negative. Okay,
Yeah.
that's basically it. So that's a shortcut for everybody. And again, this is a lesson for everybody. Ask me questions. If you get confused, ask me and I'll show you a much easier method to solve something. Okay, I always have a lot of tricks up my sleeve. Okay, so I'm not wearing sleeves right now, by the way. I'm wearing a half sleeve shirt, so that's not true. Anyways, so now we know the slope of our line L. However, we're still not really out of the trouble because we don't know the second thing. We don't know any point on the line, or do we? We do actually, because look, we have only used the perpendicular part of our line. We haven't really talked about the bisector part. As I said, bisector means it cuts you in half. I mean, not you, but the line you have. So if you have a perpendicular bisector of AB, then wouldn't it be fair to say that my bisector passes through exactly the midpoint of A and B? Whatever is dead in the center of AB, that's where my line passes through. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. So all I need to do to find a point on my line is to find the midpoint of A and B because it's a bisector. Because L is a bisector, it passes through the center of AB. How do you find midpoints? Anybody know? Everybody lost? I don't know either, by the way. That's why I'm asking. I'm
Is
kidding.
it? Oh.
No, I'm joking. Go on. Go on, go on. Give it a
Oh.
go.
Is it like x plus x2 over 2?
Exactly. Very good.
And
Yeah,
then
because you're
with
basically
y?
trying to, uh-huh. You're trying to find the average of the two x values. So you add them up, divide them by 2. So the midpoint, so of course, the midpoint is an xy, right? It has a coordinate. So the x coordinate of the midpoint will simply be the average of the x values of A and B. So 2 plus 6 divided by 2. So that'll give you the midpoint, well, the x coordinate of the midpoint. 2 plus 6 over 2. Okay, as you can see, 2 plus 6 over 2. And similarly for the y value, we're going to add the y values up and divide them by 2. So 3 plus 1 over 2. This is 8 over 2. This is 4 over 2. So the coordinate is 4 comma 2. And as you can see, because math is so beautiful, the midpoint has exactly the coordinate that we expected. 4, 2. I mean, unless my drawing was horrible and my straight lines were just not good at all, that wouldn't be the case. But thankfully, my wife is a designer, so I have to be good at drawing sometimes. That's
Wait,
why my midpoint my midpoint is now
can
found.
can I ask
Uh-huh.
if the question ever asks for a midpoint, but it's only 1 point question, is it enough to just look at the graph and jot down whatever it says, or do you have to show working?
That's a good question actually, you know. Because you guys are AI, that would not be a bad idea. However, um, they might try to intentionally throw you off, you know. They might
Mm,
intentionally give you a midpoint that looks like, oh, it passes through that, but when you zoom in, you see that it's like not exactly there. So
mm.
it's always easier because this is a very simple calculation. I think everybody can agree, right? Just add the x values divided by 2 and same thing for the y. So I would suggest that, you know, obviously I always suggest that save time as much as you can. But in this situation, it might just be better to do the calculation, you know, and
Okay.
yeah. So finally, we know the midpoint. So this midpoint is also on line L, right? Because that was the whole point. And we also know the slope of our line. So finally, we can find the who did that? We can find the equation
That
of our
was me,
line.
my bad.
It's okay, it's okay. You guys can draw anywhere. I'll give you guys a little whiteboard. So you can just, do your thing over there. All right, so you know the slope of your line and you know a point on the line. So finally, we can just do the same thing we did last time, right there, all of this, to find the equation of our line. Okay, so what will we do? Let's see. To finish off part A, we will first say that since we know the slope of our line is -2, and we know that a point on the line is 4, 2, we can firstly write down the equation with the slope and then plug in the point. So if I plug in 2 for y and 4 for x, I will get 2 equals -2 times 4 plus b, which is 2 equals -8 plus b. And finally, if I add 8 to both sides to remove this -8, I will get 2 plus 8, which is 10. That gives me the b value. And finally, I can say that y equals -2x plus 10. That's it. So this was one more thing about straight lines that we're supposed to know about, the perpendicular thing, okay? So you can also kind of remember this rule as I explained later, by just understanding that if you know the slope of a line, then the slope of the perpendicular line will simply be -1 over the slope of the other line. So that's the rule basically. So if the slope of a line is 2, perpendicular would be -1 over 2. If a slope of a line is -1 over 5, the perpendicular would be 5, and vice versa, of course. Okay, so just minus and flip, that's it. And that'll give you the slope of the perpendicular line. As you can see, if the slope of AB is 1 over 2, then the perpendicular would be -2. Okay, everybody clear on this?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So this is basically everything that you need to know about straight lines. So now let's talk about quadratics. By the way, do you guys have any questions right now or later? Just give me a message, okay? And I will, if it's a short question, I'll answer it, on the text itself. Otherwise, I'll talk about it in the next class. Now, here's the deal. So right now I have a video recorded that goes over everything you need to know about quadratic graphs and factorizing, okay? But for now, let's look at a question. Maybe before we talk about the question, let me give you guys some information. Let's actually stop the recording and make a new one for quadratics.